I could go ahead and break these two, and it would be very dangerous and pretty toxic, especially this bad boy. This thing. So, we've all seen this thing before, right? When we turn it on, it illuminates light.
Every 60 seconds in Africa, a minute passes.
Anyways, in case you didn't already know, this would be an incandescent light bulb, which I also talked about in one of my previous videos. Since we live in a world where technology is constantly changing, we have evolved from a few eras of light bulbs. First this, then this, an LED. It looks sexier than the other ones too, don't you think? Is it still possible that LEDs are not as efficient as we think they are? How do they work? What does the term LED even stand for? Let's find out. Let's start off by breaking down the components of all types of lamps. Number 1. The incandescent lamp consists mainly of the filament, which is made of tungsten, the metal with the highest melting point in the universe, the stem, the fuse, and the gas filling. Number 2. The fluorescent lamp consists mainly of the bulb itself, the ballast, which are now replaced with electronic ballasts, and the starter. Do keep in mind that if one of these components malfunction in a fluorescent lamp, you should probably consider a replacement of the whole thing. Number 3, the LED consists mainly of a driver, a chip, which is basically a light board or an LED PCB, and a piece of thermal housing. Now that we know the most basic electronic components inside all of these lamps, let's dive further into the realm of LEDs. I'm probably not going to be going through every type of LED that's out there, but it's important to know that for the most part, LED lamps are just a whole bunch of tiny LEDs put together to create one bright lamp. The LED is also known as the light emitting diode. My best guess is you've probably heard of a diode before and it sounds familiar. A diode is basically a transistor cut in half. Well, yes, in a way. What a diode does is that it allows electricity to flow in only one direction, but completely blocks it from going in the opposite direction. Similar to if you were told, keep going forward and don't turn back. Therefore, an LED or a light emitting diode is exactly the way it sounds. Hence, a diode that emits light. Literally, DEL. No, I'm just kidding. Call it an LED. Why would you call it DEL? As you may know, regular transistors and diodes both commonly use a semiconductor material known as silicon or even germanium. A semiconductor is a material that is not too good at allowing electricity to flow through it, nor too bad. Now, the only problem with silicon and germanium here is that they convert electrical energy into heat energy. Generally, in the world of electricity, our aim is to convert electrical energy into some other form of energy. For example, motors convert electrical energy into mechanical energy. In the case of an LED, it must convert electrical energy directly to light energy. It must release photons. Therefore, it must use something other than silicon or germanium, and instead use a compound semiconductor material. Just stay with me. I know I'm just spitting out a whole bunch of techno babble. What I'm trying to say is that if you know how a regular diode works, you know how an LED works. I can't possibly get into all the details because it does get a little bit complicated for me to explain. But what basically happens with a diode is that one side would be N-type dope and the other side P-type doped. As the power source is pumping out electrons, it repels the extra electrons that are existent in the N-type region, and it fills up the electron holes that are existent on the P side. This happens because the P side has less electrons than the N side. Again, this is just covering the basics. When these extra electrons from the N side fill the electron holes on the P side, heat is released as a result, in the case of silicon or germanium. Now, in case we're talking about an LED or a light-emitting diode, light would be released instead while using the exact same process. Now let's take a look at those tiny little 5mm LEDs. There is the cathode terminal, which is negative, and the reflective cavity is what holds the LED chip, and the chip itself is what contains the semiconductor material. That is then connected by a tiny bond wire to the anode terminal, which is positive. There you go! That's a simple LED. Now, how on earth do we go from this to this? Well, you already know everything about a tiny LED. Again, LED bulbs are just a whole bunch of tiny LEDs slapped together to create a bright light. The driver that we already talked about is simply there to provide the LED bulb with the electricity to function properly. That's very similar to how a ballast powers a fluorescent lamp. So at the end of the day, LEDs are pretty much the undisputed champion in the world of light bulbs. They get very bright, aren't very dangerous, so you don't get the oxidizing that you get with incandescence or the mercury vapor that you get with fluorescence. I could go ahead and break these two and it would be very dangerous and pretty toxic, especially this bad boy. This thing, nothing happens to it. And even if you did actually break it, well, guess what? It's not dangerous at all because it's an LED. And they're overall, to no surprise, very efficient. Right now, this LED that I'm holding in my hand uses only 15 watts of power, while this stinking thing uses 100. It even says here with a quick Google search, an incandescent can go for about 1,200 hours in comparison to 25,000 hours. Incandescents obviously emit light, but 95% of it is just heat being emitted. Now, despite all of this, LEDs still waste about 20%. This was probably way worse though before, about 60%. Is that truly the most efficient though? Anyways, I think I said all I wanted. Oh, if you like electronics and maybe even astronomy, I make videos on that too, by the way, be sure to subscribe, or else you won't be learning anything at the speed of light. No, seriously, subscribe or I will find you. If you really like the intro and want to check out the full video, there will be a link to it in the description and also on my end screen. As always, keep on thinking.